Hi everybody, this is Ryan. I'm here for a video. This time we're going to talk a little about statistics. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about these videos and their purpose and also the purpose of the study plan. This video intention is to give an introduction to what you're going to be learning in the study plan. The study plan is where you need to be focused on in learning the content. So you've got to do a study plan. Don't rely on these videos to do everything. They're purely an introduction to the lesson. So let's get started. So we're going to learn about some definitions. So the first one is population. The population of a study is the group collected to. The population of a study is the group the collected data is intended to describe. So an example of that would be students at Newman. That's a population. A parameter is a number that summarizes a characteristic of the entire population. It can be an average, percent, or any other value that is calculated using the data from the population. So some examples of that would be average age, average GPA, or percentage of students taking a math class. Those are some examples. A census is a type of survey where the data is collected from every single member of the population. It's like counting or surveying every person or object in a group. So if Newman would give a survey to all students, that would be considered a census. A sample is a smaller subset of the entire population, ideally one that is fairly representative of the whole population. When we want to study a big group of people but can't survey everybody, we choose a smaller group called a sample. So an example would be the students in this class or the first year students. You can survey them. You can survey all of them at like an orientation to Newman. A statistic is a value calculated using the data from the sample. So a good statistic could be the average GPA of all students in this class. Observational units are the group of individuals, animals, or objects that are being studied or surveyed in a research study. They're the ones we want to learn about and collect information from. Variables are different characteristics or quantities of the observational units that we measured or recorded in the study. There's a couple types of data here, qualitative and quantitative data. So qualitative data describes qualities or attributes of a group, like hair color or blood type. It uses words or categories to describe these attributes, such as black hair or blood type. So if you think about maybe phone calls, a qualitative would be the mood of the caller. Are they mad? Are they happy? Are they sad? So it's a descriptor. Like you could say, I had 10 phone calls, 5 of them were mad. That's a qualitative piece of data. Quantitative data involves counting or measuring things. It uses numbers to represent information like the amount of money you have or the weight of an object. It can be divided into discrete data or continuous data, such as the number of phone calls you receive in a day or the length of the calls. So the number of phone calls you receive would be discrete because it's a 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't receive half phone calls. So that's quantitative. How long the phone calls are continuous. That's also quantitative because you can receive a 34-minute call, 35-minute call, anything in between, 34 and a half, things like that. So that's continuous. Sampling bias. When collecting a sample, it's important to choose it in a way that represents the whole group. Sampling bias happens when some members of the population are more likely to be chosen than others, which can lead to wrong conclusions about the entire population. Random samples are preferred because they have no bias, but even random samples can vary and may not perfectly represent a population. So there are several different ways. Simple random sampling is like bingo. You know, when you have the balls that are in either the tumbler thing that blows them up through the tube or the cage where you spin, each ball has an equally likely chance of being selected. So that would be a simple random sample. Systematic sampling, each person or group in the population is assigned a number Then we choose individuals at regular intervals, like every fifth or 10th person. So that would be like choosing 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. That would be systematic sampling. Every person in the population has a number. Cluster sampling is a method where instead of selecting individual people or objects, the population is divided into smaller groups called clusters, and a few of the clusters are chosen at random to study. Something like that would be the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors at Newman. Those are large clusters. Convenient sampling is when samples are chosen based on who is readily available or convenient. Voluntary response sampling is a method where individuals choose to participate. Now, so bias is important. You need to take a look at bias. There's several different types of bias. Sampling bias is when the sample is not represented by the population. Voluntary response bias is sample bias that occurs often when the sample is by volunteers. Non-response bias when people refusing to participate in the study can influence the validity of the outcome. Response bias occurs when the responder gives inaccurate responses for any reason. Self-interest study bias can occur when the researchers have an interest in the outcome. Perceived lack of anonymity when the responders fear that giving honest answers might negatively reflect them. Loaded questions when the question's wording influences responses. Undercoverage occurs when some groups of the population are left out of the sampling process. Confounding happens when there are two possible factors that could have caused a result, and we can't tell which one is actually responsible. That's also called collinearity. Like two things are collinear, they're producing the same outcome. An observational study is a study based on observations or measurements. An experiment is a study in which the effects of the treatment are measured. Treatments and placebos. Treatments are experimental conditions in which the participants are divided, some into groups receiving treatment of interest and others into a control group. A placebo is a harmless version of the treatment that does not contain any active ingredients, i.e. a sugar pill. The placebo effect is when the effectiveness of the treatment is influenced by the patient's perception of how effective they think the treatment will be, so a result might be seen even if the treatment is ineffectual. A placebo is a dummy treatment given to a control for the placebo effect. An experiment that gives the control group a placebo is called the placebo control group. So a blind study is when the participants don't know if they are in the treatment or the placebo. A double-blind study is when the researchers also don't know who's in each group. So I hope you like this video. If you have questions, please let me know. Again, you're going to use this as you do your study for this module.